The Hills Have Eyes, a work of fiction by horror master Wes Craven. But what if I were to tell you that it has some fact behind it? I am Dr. Peter Persil, and this is my real horrors. Why hello there, and welcome to a new episode of Dr. Purcell's Real Horrors. I am Dr. Peter Persil, and in this edition, I am going to go over the case of Sawney Bean and his family, known as the Real Hills Have Eyes. So in 1977, horror legend Wes Craven produced a film known as The Hills Have Eyes, a film about cannibals and murder and cannibalism and such. But what if I were to tell you that that film was in fact based on true events? Well, I'm here to tell you that. So let's start from where it all occurred. It all started with Sawney Bean. Born Alexander Bean during the 16th century near Edinburgh, Scotland. His father was a ditch digger and hedge trimmer, and Sawney, also known as Sawney Bean, he met a young woman. The locals referred to her as Black Agnes Douglas. With no money, no shelter, nowhere to really live, they took refuge in a cave. This cave, known as Benach Cave, do forgive my pronunciation, Benith Cave, they settled down there. The cave going for many miles and having many tunnels and secret passages. They eventually settled down in that cave and started a family, having over 14 children, 8 sons and 6 daughters. And of course, to provide for his family, Bean resorted to robberies and eventually murder. Yes, murder. And then, of course, the family soon joining in with these escapades. And to get rid of all the evidence, the family would take their victims and start to eat them, cannibalize them. And of course, the family grew. Bean and Agnes eventually gained 18 grandchildren. Well, 18 grandsons and 14 granddaughters, all from inbreeds and incestuous relations, having their children have their children and them also interbreeding with them, gaining over 50 people in this family, all craving human flesh. Of course, they continued this for 20 years, or at least 2 decades. Of course, there were missing people cases, and there were, of course, searches for these missing folk. Being he had taught his family to hunt villages and eat them as if they were animals. Of course, their reign of terror was then, of course, short-lived. Of course, over time, there were human remains that did wash up ashore, but no one could link the murders together, given the technology and well, the time they lived in. Their reign of terror was only stopped when the family attacked a couple, a man and a woman. They grabbed the woman and disemboweled her and ripped her to shreds, along with the husband, but then they would be met by 20 more people who were also coming back from this fair. Basically the whole village then hearing of them. The family, of course, were arrested, but there was more to come. In fact, this raised so much horror that even King James VI was involved in the case. He came up to Scotland with an army of 400 men. And, of course, when they came to this small village around Scotland in Edinburgh, they had found, well, not much, until one of the sniffer dogs could smell decaying human flesh, and it led them to the caves. But the troops were unprepared for what would follow. And of course, when they went into the caves and lit it up, they were horrified by what they found. They found human limbs and body parts that they did not eat, decorating the walls of the caves. They even noticed piles of clothing over the years of their victims and jewelry and possessions. This army of men arrested the whole family. And of course, seeing this beyond any human behavior, seeing this beyond the justice system, they all decided to sentence the whole family to death. The men would be left to, well, they were left to be let's just say it was a grisly fate for them, being treated pretty much like their victims and left to bleed out and die. As for the women, they were all burnt to death. To be honest, I don't know which death was merciful, them being tortured and left to bleed, or burnt at the stake. Either way, it's definitely not a pleasant way to go. And of course, this whole case inspired horror master Wes Craven, who of course had only done a couple of films at that time, probably known for his 1972 film The Last House on the Left. He came in 1977 and gave us this film, The Hills Have Eyes, spawning a sequel and some remakes as well. Wes Craven would not just use this work of fact to inspire his fiction. In a previous episode, I covered the real A Nightmare on Elm Street, or Sons, which, as I've said, is a previous episode that inspired his works of A Nightmare on Elm Street, but we're talking about The Real Hills Have Eyes here. Of course, I can only think of another film franchise which had this inbreeding cannibals, and that was the 2003 film Wrong Turn, which again gained a franchise. That is what I like about Wes Craven. He takes his fiction from fact, and I think that's what makes it good and effective. Wes Craven knows what to write about, knows what fears us. So yes, that's pretty much all I've had to cover about Sawney Bean and family. The Real Hills Have Eyes. I hope you've enjoyed this edition of My Real Horrors. I have been your host, Dr. Peter Persil. And be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe to the official Random Horror YouTube channel and to hit that notification bell. Let me also know as well, did you learn anything about this? Till next time, don't have nightmares.